For those of you who don't know, last week I was in Wisconsin. We were there to celebrate the 50th wedding anniversary of my aunt and uncle. It was a great time to be with family, to be there and to celebrate with them. But part of what made it great was knowing that things here would run smoothly without me being here. I don't know if you are aware of it, but I am very much aware of the talented people we have that are part of our staff and the volunteers that work here. This is a great place to be, and I hope you appreciate all those who make it possible. I invite you now to stand in honor of the living word, whose voice is heard in the written word, this time coming to us from the fourth chapter of Timothy, 2 Timothy, beginning in the 6th verse. I'm already being poured out like a sacrifice to God, and the time of my death is near. I have fought the good fight, finished the race, and kept the faith. At last, the champion's wreath that is awarded for righteousness is waiting for me. The Lord, who is the righteous judge, is going to give it to me on that day. He's giving it not only to me, but also to all those who have set their heart on waiting for his appearance. No one took my side at my first court hearing. Everyone deserted me. I hope that God doesn't hold it against them. But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength so that the entire message would be preached through me, and so all the nations could hear it. I was also rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil action and will save me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and always. Amen. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. You know, I hadn't really thought about it for much, but I'm beginning to wonder if this is the wedding season. We had a wedding here last night. 2 weeks from now, there will be another wedding here. 2 weeks after that, there will be yet a third wedding. In between those, I will be going to Hiawatha to officiate at a wedding with a couple that I was meeting with before I moved here, because their new pastor is going to be out of town because his sister is getting married. I used to think June was the wedding month, but I'm beginning to wonder if this isn't the season for weddings now. What I do know is that each of these couples is making a commitment to each other. They are committing to each other. They're making a commitment to God. They are committing to this new entity that's called a marriage. It's something that's not so common in our culture anymore, to make that kind of commitment. I mean, it used to be really common. People would commit to things. It used to be that people would have a whole career working for the same company. That doesn't happen very often anymore. It used to be that people would live in the same neighborhood for a whole generation. That doesn't happen so much anymore. It used to be that people would join a church with the expectation that they would be baptized there and married there and buried there. That doesn't happen so much anymore. I mean, there are exceptions. There are still people who make those kinds of commitments. But as a whole, in our society, that kind of commitment is lacking, sometimes even rare. And you may have already sensed that in places, but it can also be measured, and it has been. There have been scholars who studied that. One of them is Robert Putnam, who wrote the book Bowling Alone. He says that too many of us prefer to go bowling by ourselves than to join a bowling league and be on a team and bowl every week. We don't want to make that kind of a commitment. And it's not that we can't make commitments. It's that we make a different kind of commitment, usually a commitment to ourselves and our own benefit. So we ask a different set of questions. For example, we think, Sunday morning, there's so many different things I could be doing this morning. And not many of us make a commitment to be here on a regular basis because we have other options. Or maybe we think about the elections that way. What's it going to mean for me if this person's elected? Instead of asking, what's going to happen to our society as a whole based on what we do? Part of it, the reason I think we don't want to make a commitment like that is because we don't like the idea of sacrifice. We don't like sacrificing. I mean, we just don't. I mean, we might use that word in a way that's not really sacrifice. We talk about how we spend an enormous amount of time practicing or rehearsing as if that's a sacrifice in order to perform somewhere, whether we're performing a musical piece or performing on a stage or even performing an athletic event. But that's not really sacrifice. Sacrifice is when we give something of value for someone else. When we give something of value for someone else, it becomes a sacrifice. Many of us know what that's like. Parents sacrifice for their children. We give precious sleep for our children. We give of our resources for our children. We give of our time for our children. We give something special and of value on behalf of the other. These couples that are getting married are giving to each other in a way that's a sacrifice. They are giving up other things that could be a part of their lives in order to strengthen and make their marriage the best that it can be. Paul says that his entire life has been a sacrifice. It's being poured out on behalf of Jesus, on behalf of the church. He's writing these words at a time when he could see the end is coming. There's not much time left. There's little to look forward to, but he knows he's finishing the race with a sense of dignity and confidence because he has poured out his entire life as a sacrifice. It's filled with sacrifice. I mean, he very easily could have remained a Pharisee and been well respected in his community. Instead, he chose to become a follower of Jesus. And as a follower of Jesus, he finds himself traveling throughout the Roman Empire, starting new churches, being arrested, put in prison, beaten, stoned, left for dead, all because of his love for God, his love for the church, his sacrifice. And now he's writing a letter inviting Timothy and anyone else who will read it later on, including us, to follow his model, to sacrifice our own selves, our own lives for the sake of Jesus. It will require a sacrifice. It will require us to make a commitment. You know, when we join the church, we make a commitment. We ask people if they will commit to the church with our prayers and our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness. In fact, we're going to ask you today to take your pledge cards and put them in the offering plate. It's an expression of one part of that commitment to the church. But that's not the only way we can give, and not the only way we can make a commitment. The nominating committee has been calling people, asking you to serve in a variety of roles. We heard folks up here this morning making announcements, inviting you to participate in mission projects and ministries. The trunk or treat invitation to be a participant in that is an invitation for you to make a commitment to be in ministry with us. We also have some folks who at the end of our service today will make a commitment and join our church. We had 2 who joined in the first service. The rest of them are joining today in this service. But that reminds me that so many times I think people look at church membership the same way we look at alumni status in our schools. You know, doesn't matter where you graduated from, nobody can take that away from you. You've earned that. Even if the school closes down, you are still an alumni of that place. Too many of us think church membership is like that. We think, oh, well, that's the church I grew up in. That's the church where I met Christ. That's the church where I learned to walk with Jesus. All said in the past tense instead of the present. By the way, I think there are a lot of folks who think of church kind of the way we think of going to a ball game. You know, I don't know if you've ever thought about it. hundreds or thousands of people in stands who need exercise, who are watching 10 or 18 or 22 people on the field, depending upon what sport, who all need a break from exercise. But what happens is we begin to think we're part of the team, even though we're just watching. They're the ones who are doing the work. In the church, we oftentimes think of the pastor and the musicians and the worship leaders as those who are being directed by God on behalf of and to the congregation. The reality is, it's more like what your bulletin cover says. We don't go to church, we are the church. And we exist for the world. The reality is that the pastor and the music leaders and the other leaders in our church are here to direct and invite the congregation to serve and to give on behalf of and for the world because of who God is. It's kind of like moving from the stands in the ball field down onto the field. Now, I know some of them will sit on the bench for a while, waiting their turn to play. Some of them will be the coaches, and some of them will be the medical assistants, and there will be other staff positions that are part of that team that's on the field. But the one who's sitting in the locker room pretending to be a part of the team really isn't a part of the team. We need to make a commitment to be a part of this great team we call West Heights United Methodist Church. It's kind of like that commitment couples are making to each other. They're making a commitment so that their marriage will be the best it can possibly be, to sustain them and allow them to grow in their faith. It will require sacrifice. It means making a commitment. It's kind of like Paul, who pours himself out for the sake of Jesus and the church. An invitation for us to follow in like kind. We've invited you to do that. Make a commitment with a pledge card. And some of you will give generously. There will be others who will come and serve in committees and groups and offer new ideas for us to be in ministry together. There are some who will offer their talents and gifts in music, and there's some who offer their love of children to be a part of this great team that we call West Heights United Methodist Church. But today we are asking you to make a commitment. Fill out a pledge card and put it in the offering plate. To use one of those sign-up sheets and commit to serving, to being a part of this, or to join the church. I know we have some people who are joining. If you're not one of those who wants to join and hasn't told me that ahead of time, you can count on up when I invite them to come up too. I'm convinced that when we learn to pour ourselves out, we will find the kind of joy that Paul finds, even though he's in prison. That the love of God flowing through us, poured out for others, brings immense joy to each of us and to all of us. Thanks be to God.